So now we're going to learn about this topic, content provider. And content provider is basically a repository of data, or it means a storage of data. Now, a provider as part of the Android application requires to provide information regarding the data. For example, let us consider WhatsApp. Now, when you open your WhatsApp, you can see that all backup messages, all the person details of the person who has sent it are all being loaded from one particular database. Unless you have an internet connection, you can see that your data restored will be from the old database. So a content provider basically provides all information required for your Android application. And moving on, you can see that you can read all these things to get the basic concepts. So a content provider basically sends information to various adapters that are held as part of the processes. The cursor loaders, the widgets, the search engines, the data storage elements, and your other applications. So the job is of the content provider would be to manage these many elements held as part of your Android application. The next topic that we have to learn is SQLite. But before that, let us get a concept of what is SQL. So this is basically a site called W3 Schools, and you can undergo an SQL tutorial lesson over here. So let us start off with SQL. So SQL is basically a standard language for storing, manipulating, and retrieving data in databases. Now we are not moving much into it. We are just understanding the basic concept. So we'll just see how an SQL concept works. So SQL basically stands for a structured query language. And what happens here is it is basically used to obtain data or to send data into a database and to manipulate data that is available in the database. So you're using a thing called query to extract information or to feed in information to the database. So these are all the functions of a database. It can execute queries, it can retrieve data, it can insert records, it can update records, it can delete records, and perform so many functions. So we'll get an information about what is an SQL using an example. Now another thing that you need to do is RDBMS, which stands for Relational Database Management System, and it is a basis for SQL. And a data in RDBMS will be stored in database objects called tables. So table is a collection of related data entries, and it consists of columns and rows. So we'll take a look at the customer table so you can see it for yourself. We'll try this example, and when we try this example, you have an SQL statement over here. You have this select statement called select star from customers. Now when you run that SQL, you can see that it is accessing this table called customers, and it is extracting the details of all the values stored in that table called customers. Now this has got these many columns: customer ID, customer name, contact name, addresses, city, postal code, country, etc. So all these information are stored over here up to 91 records, which is mentioned over there. So we'll have a check, and there are 91 records as shown over here. Okay, moving on, we'll do one more example. So we are trying to, this was like a built-in table over here. So we'll just run another one statement. And suppose if we go to another table like employees, so that is mentioned over there. It has got 10 entries. We run this SQL query, and you can see that that table is also loaded over here with 10 entries. So you can see that this contains employee ID, last name, first name, birth date, photo, and note. So that makes up the table that is shown over here. Now, what if I need to have a selected selective query? That means if I want, let's go back to that customer table itself, where we have different options. So I want to select a list of customers from Germany. So I have to give a statement like this: select star from customers where country is equal to Mexico. I give it in quotes, and when I run this query, you can see that it has brought forward all the entries in that table which are from Mexico. So you can see here that I'm looking into another one table called products, which has got 77 entry, which contains these many details. So I give a where statement over here where price is equal to 18, and I run this SQL and it gives you all the items that are having the price equal to 18. And if I want to just see what are the product IDs and what is the product name, I can give it. If I don't want the entire table, but I just want the product ID and product name, I can give a query like this, and when I run this, my query just gives out the product ID and product name from that particular table where price is equal to 18. So that is an example of SQL query that I wanted to show, and I hope that point is clear. For more information, if you want, you can try out this site called W3 Schools, from which you can learn more. While we learned about SQL, for Android we are using an open source database engine called SQLite, which can be regarded as a lighter version of SQL. Now it is lighter because it has three properties. One, it is self-contained. One, it is meaning it is built-in. It is serverless, meaning it doesn't require another server to access the database because the database is loaded within itself, and it would be smaller in size compared to regular applications. And it requires zero configuration, such as no separate configuration is required where since you are not using any additional servers. Some of the properties of this SQLite are as follows. One, it is supporting cross-platform arrangements. It is self-contained. It is optimized for a single user, and it is stable and fast. Some of the features of the transactions are listed below, like it should be atomic, it should obey the ACID property, where A stands for atomic, C stands for consistent, I for isolated, and D for durable. And you have all these properties which can be self-read and understood. Now, if you want to open up a database, you have to use the steps are mentioned over here. Now, you need to import a package which is as shown over here, and it would contain many classes like cursor, content values, etc. And here the class basically used is SQLite database. And if you have to open or create a database, you have to use a method called open or create database method. So you can see over here, this particular thing is a method used for creation of database. So you have an object being created over here, and then you have the command being executed, my database equal to open or create database. You're giving the parameters over here and you're running this thing and you're getting your database as created. Now, once you have created a database, the next step is you have to create a table. So please read through these texts to understand the matter in a much descriptive way. Now, if you want to create a table, what you need to do is execute another SQL statement, whereby you can see over here that you're issuing a statement called create table, where the table name is authors, and it contains three parameters. One is ID, which is of integer format, which is a primary key, and it auto increments. So with the first entry, it becomes 1. With the second entry, it becomes 2. So it basically supports auto increment. Now, the next term is first name and the last name, which will be text in data format. So once you execute this particular statement using that object, you are executing this statement execSQL A, and you're creating your table. So once you've created your table, the next purpose would be to insert into this particular table. So you need to insert. So based on what we have learned, it has three elements. One is ID, which is auto increment. So you don't have to enter it as such. It will update automatically, but you have to enter the first name and the last name. So you're going to use another set of line of code over here. So basically what happens is you have to use a class called content values. And inside that content values, you will be accessing different methods like put, insert, etc. So we'll create an object of that content values called values, and using that values, we'll load the values into fname and last name. So that fname will be first stored with JK, lname will be stored with Rowling, and so fname is basically standing for JK Rowling. The entire data is basically standing for JK Rowling, which is who is an author. Now, if you want to insert it into the database, you'll be using mydatabase.insert. The table that we are going to access, that is authors, and what should be inserted, the values. So the first entry in that particular table will be 1, which is defined by itself, and the first name will be loaded with JK, and the last name will be loaded with Rowling. So that is how you insert value into this database. So you have to read through the notes. Then we need to update the data. To update the data into the database, we are going to use another function called update. Again, the concept is same. You have updating means you have already inserted a value. So example, let us assume we have inserted 10 values into that table, starting from 1 to 10, like J.K. Rowling. Then you have Rudyard Kipling, you have Bram Stoker, you have different authors like that, Dan Brown. Like that, you have 10 set of authors whose names have been entered. So once, if you want to alter any entry, suppose if you want to alter the fifth person with the name Charles Dickens. So if you want to do that, what you have to do is you have to again load you're going to use a class called content values. You're creating an object called values, and values will be loaded with the value Charles and Dickens into the F name and last name as entries. And then you have to update, use a function called update authors with the values. Now, where do you have to update? And that has to be passed as an argument like this, where your ID is referred as 5. So here it means ID 5 will be replaced with whatever value that was existing over there with Charles Dickens. Now, if you look over here, you can see a different version over here. Here you can see that there is a long new author ID equal to my database.insert. So this is long author ID is basically indicating the status of the insertion operation. Just like you have a flag being set off if you are performing some operation, like if you remember in your microcontroller, if you are performing two 8-bit additions and you have a carry, your carry flag will be set. You can have indications of a successful operation being set. So here you have a long new author ID term which is created over here, and it is basically used to indicate the status of the insertion operation. Uh, if you have to observe it for another operation, then definitely getting a return value would be good. If it is return value is 1, it implies success. If its return value is -1, it may implies failure. So it is not always necessary that you have to go for a return value. So hence you have only my database update over here, and you have the delete data function also. So just like that, you have my database.delete authors ID, and you need to pass the argument. So I hope these points are clear. So we looked into database, we looked into SQL basic concepts, we looked into SQLite basic concepts, and then we looked into the 4 functionalities. One is the creation of a database. Then we looked into the creation of table, and then we looked into the various operations, that is insert, update, and delete. So we have seen the function of that, and I hope these points are clear. We'll see in the later video.